This is Retirement Keys with Anthony Kangemi from Crescent City Retirement Group. When a part of your financial strategy is out of tune, your long-term goals, your retirement savings, and your legacy can all suffer. With many years of experience in the financial industry, Anthony provides his clients and prospects with the information they need regarding Social Security, retirement income planning, wealth management, and much more. Listen in as we address your financial concerns and provide helpful solutions to put you on the path to achieving your retirement goals. And now, here is Retirement Keys with your host, Anthony Kangemi.
All right, welcome to another show of Retirement Keys. My name's Anthony Kangemi, and we have our fabulous co-host, Mr. Tony Shore, who Tony and I were just talking off air. It's been a little over 9 years that Tony and I have been together with Retirement Keys, with our radio show. And so I didn't realize it had been 9 years, Tony, but I think it has. And it's just been a fabulous ride. We couldn't have done the show without you. So thank you so much, Tony, for being with us as you are every Sunday.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. And as I was telling you, I was up in Minnesota at an event, and I ran into some folks from the New Orleans area, and I said, oh, yeah, I co-host a financial radio show there. And they go, oh, is it with Anthony Kangemi? We listen to that show. So I run into your listeners all over the country up in St. Paul, Minnesota. They were visiting some family up there from New Orleans, and they're from New Orleans, I should say, and I'm like, oh, yeah, he's in Metairie and has an office there. And, I said, you guys got to reach out. So that was really great to meet some of our listeners, even across the states. Isn't that amazing?
It is. It really is. So I was pleased to hear that. And, we have a great outreach with our show. I think it's well received. We, as you know, we plan and try to stay relevant and put out the best content that we can as it relates to retirement planning. So we just appreciate our listeners. We really do. And thank you so much for tuning in this morning.
Yeah, it's going to be a great show. In fact, I know you wanted to talk about some of the main components and keys to retirement planning. How do you use the word holistic when you talk about the services you offer? And holistic retirement and financial planning is different than just going to somebody who sells insurance or going to somebody who just invests your money in the stock market, like a broker. A holistic financial advisor who's a fiduciary is going to look out for your best interests and look at all the different pieces of the puzzle, right?
Absolutely, Tony. And I would say that's the difference. And all the pieces to the puzzle really coordinated properly can complement each other and do complement each other. It's almost like the old saying, the right hand needs to know what the left hand's doing, right?
Right.
If you've got a piecemeal plan and you've got insurance over here and taxes over there and investments somewhere else and annuities and Social Security strategy somewhere else, and all of those pieces don't really pair with each other and complement each other, then they can't work as well as if you really coordinate all of that, Tony. And so, as you well know, we really believe that these 5 keys that we talk about to a stress-free retirement are really essential for those 5 pieces to be working in harmony together.
Right. And so let's go over some of the aspects of a holistic or all-encompassing retirement plan. And a lot of these things aren't things that people are going to end up doing on their own without help. And a lot of people don't realize all of the aspects they need to cover and some of the pitfalls they need to avoid. So what's one of the first things that you like to talk about with people about a holistic retirement plan? What's the first part?
Well, the first part, Tony, will ultimately be the last phase, which is estate and legacy planning. So with estate and legacy planning, this is obviously part of a retirement plan, and it's how our assets transfer to the next to the our beneficiaries, to our who's going to inherit, whether it be a spouse or children or grandchildren. So our estate plan, how things are going to pass on, and it's a critical piece, Tony. And when we talk about holistic planning, as an example, some assets transfer through the will or through succession. We call it succession in Louisiana. Most states refer to that as probate. But really, it's just the transferring of assets. It's their retitling of assets. So the will be the document that really lets the attorneys know and the court know how these assets should transfer. So a will is very important. But the other aspect of a plan, a legacy plan, is through the beneficiary designation. So really, assets transfer in these two ways, through beneficiary designation or through the will. Now, in the beneficiary designation, Tony, again, all your life insurance, annuities, retirement plans, IRAs, 401ks, all of these type of retirement plans, and these insurance products, annuities, life insurance, all transfer by beneficiary designation, which is a real efficient way to transfer those assets. But again, these beneficiary forms and how things are going to transfer and the will, all of this has to be more or less coordinated to make sure that, again, the right hand knows what the left hand's doing. But I would say, Tony, for our first key, if you will, estate and legacy planning, how things are going to transfer. We want to be as efficient as possible. It's about passing assets on to the appropriate family members, whether it be spouse, kids, grandkids, even special charities. But how do we transfer assets in the most efficient way is really a big part of retirement planning.
Yeah, that's huge. And obviously that's an important part. And you don't want to leave your loved ones in a bad situation. And I'm actually going through that right now with my parents and my dad's father. So it's my parent. I had to move. I went down to see my parents last week to help my mom because she needs to move into a facility. And my dad's not doing great, but my grandfather, I don't know, the communication about them, about legacy planning. It's a tough conversation to have, and so that's a good place to start. Make sure you have a will and any trusts you need set up. Make sure you have a plan for your estate. And that's not just for the wealthy. Everyone needs to do that, but don't do it alone. You need to work with somebody. And I know your office works with estate planning attorneys, Anthony, to help your clients with this. And if our listeners have any questions, they can give you a call. I think that's so important. In fact, why don't we take a minute to let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you to set up that complimentary, no cost, no obligation consultation?
Absolutely. So when you call, you'll call 504-828-2171. Let one of the ladies know that you heard Tony and I on the radio this morning talking about the 5 keys to a stress-free retirement. If estate and legacy planning is something that you want to learn more about, we have a fabulous piece. It's called the estate. It's really just a checklist, but the estate and legacy planning checklist, and it's really good because it keeps everybody on track, and it's just asks specific questions. What about this? What about that? Some people have been are in second marriages. Maybe they have kids from previous marriages, which is perfectly normal and very common, or even 3 or 4 marriages, frankly. But nevertheless, however, assets are to go and to whom, really, it's really this checklist really drills down and gets very specific about how things should be, what should be considered. So yes, 504-828-2171 is a great number to call to get that information.
All right, that sounds great. And listeners, stay tuned. We're going to be right back with more of Retirement Keys with our host, Anthony Congemi.
You've been listening to our shows and advice on getting your finances in order and creating a retirement income plan that will last. Now is the time to take advantage of our special offer. This is Anthony Congemi with Crescent City Retirement Group, and we're now offering our 3-step retirement planning process at no cost and a $100 gift card to the restaurant of your choice upon completion of the planning process. Call Crescent City Retirement Group within the next 20 minutes at 504-828-2171. That number again is 504-828-2171.
And welcome back to Retirement Keys. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore, and I'm here with our host, Anthony Congemi from Crescent City Retirement. And Anthony, great show so far. We're going over the different parts of a holistic retirement plan. And you talked a little bit about legacy and estate planning, making sure you have a plan in place for that. What's next?
Well, Tony, let's talk a little bit about healthcare. That's another piece.
That's a big one.
That's another aspect of retirement planning that sometimes gets overlooked. Healthcare planning is really just having a plan in the event that somebody gets sick or ill or has an accident or a disability and they need care. Healthcare planning can really take on two forms. One would be what we would call medical care. Obviously hospitals, doctors, specialists, and maybe you have Medicare, maybe you have some type of Medicare program, or maybe you're with a company group for your health insurance, or whatever the case. But that's your medical care. The other aspect of healthcare planning would be long-term care. And that's the kind of care you would need if you're unable to care for yourself due to an illness or an accident. And people typically want to recover once they're discharged from the hospital or some type of a skilled nursing facility. There's places to recover. Obviously, most folks, I would say, if you took a poll, 90% of the people are going to say they want to recover at home. But there's different environments. There's home care. There's assisted living, which are these really today are some of these beautiful retirement communities, these assisted living facilities. But when you talk about long-term care, a lot of times people right away think of the nursing home. And, frankly, Tony, with a good plan, a good health care plan, the idea is to remain independent, protect the assets, stay out of the nursing home, and be able to stay home to get the care that you need while you're recovering. So long-term care planning and health care planning, Tony, is a big part of an overall retirement plan.
Well, yeah, healthcare is huge, Anthony, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's another thing. With my mom going into long-term care now, the costs can be very, very expensive. I mean, from $5,000 a month to all the way up to $12,000 a month if they need, full-time memory care in a decent facility. And Medicare doesn't cover that. That's what a lot of people misunderstand. Medicare won't cover it. And for Medicaid to cover it, you have to be pretty much spend down all your resources to get to that point. So, and that's something you don't want to do. But I know, Anthony, you've talked about there are different life insurance vehicles out there now that have long-term care coverage abilities and things like that where it makes more financial sense and other ways to help cover that and plan for that. So there are a lot of different options, and that's what holistic means. You take a look at all those different options there, Anthony. And so I think that's so important, and yet another reason for our listeners to work with a trusted financial services professional when dealing with this type of thing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Tony. So healthcare planning, there's multiple ways to go about leveraging and positioning assets to structure that additional income needed to be able to stay home or go into one of these assisted living facilities, which incidentally, about 30%. They got a beautiful place that just opened up in Harahan called the Blake, and it's beautiful. It's where Colonial Club, the country club was, and they
Yeah.
built this beautiful assisted living facility there. And but, about 30% of those folks, or I think they said almost 36 or 37% of them, looking at these new stats, or drive. They come and go like they want. So a lot of these assisted living or retirement communities are very independent. I mean, people can come and go just like they want. So it doesn't necessarily mean in those places that you're not mobile. But they've got some beautiful places like that. Also, obviously, people want to stay home. And today, with the vendors today that are available, we can build a plan of care that works really well where people can just stay home. But, at the end of the day, it's just, let's not put our head in the sand and say this will never happen to us. Let's have a plan in place within our retirement plan to have that healthcare planning to where in the event one of us, somebody needs that additional care, we've got a plan in place and we're not scrambling. And that's the thing you don't want to do, is find yourself in a situation where, oh, gee, I need additional care, or my spouse needs additional care, and what are we going to do? We'd like to have all that worked out to where in the event this takes place, we've got a plan and we know what direction we're going in.
Yeah, there you go. You have to have that plan in place. Now, Anthony, what's another aspect of retirement planning that we need to know about, and that's a major part of a holistic view?
Well, Tony, I'm going to lump these next three. I mentioned there was 5. We're going to say investments, income, and taxes. And let me just mention to you that, your investments and how you're invested is going to go a long way, and how income is structured. And it's also going to go a long way in how tax efficient we are. So we're going to lump those 3 together, even though they're very separate. But our investment strategy, our structured income plan, and our tax efficiency really goes hand in hand. And let me just say that depending on what our structured income needs to be in retirement, depending on what our tax situation is, we want to be obviously very tax efficient in our income planning. And of course, the investments and the portfolios that we're utilizing play a big role in how all that works together. And I would just say, Tony, what we really talked about in the beginning of the show, which is really these 5 keys all really work hand in hand: estate and legacy planning, in healthcare planning, our overall investment strategy, income planning, structuring income, and tax efficiency really is those 5 key areas that need to be working together to create that holistic retirement plan that really is so important, and frankly can bring a overall retirement plan that could have, let's just say, be mediocre to a really stellar plan, just by pairing these 5 ideas together and making sure that they're supporting each other.
Anthony, great show so far. In the last segment, you were talking about investments and taxes, and we're going to talk about creating that income in retirement. That's a big part of the plan. But before we get into that, I want to go back to taxes quick for a moment, because I think a lot of people have this misconception that they won't have to pay a lot of taxes in retirement. But as you've said on the show before, taxes can build up all those tax deferred accounts. You have to pay taxes on the principal and the interest when you pull them out in retirement. So that's your 401k or a traditional IRA. But there are tax-free options out there that you've talked about, and I know you help your clients minimize their tax burden and work with tax professionals, don't you?
We do, Tony. And, it's interesting, the income planning, we've talked through the whole show about how lot of this stuff pairs together, and it really does. And so income and taxes certainly is a great example of that. And, just to kind of drill down a little bit on that and how things are taxed, these pre-tax dollars, Tony, as you mentioned, IRA, 401k, these pre-tax dollars that have never been taxed, eventually will need to be taxed. And so the question is, at what rate? And so when you're structuring these income plans, you're looking at where the income is coming from. Obviously, things are taxed differently in retirement. Social Security is taxed differently. Qualified dividends, ordinary dividends, capital gains, all of this is taxed differently. Your IRA, whether it's a Roth or a traditional IRA, obviously is going to be taxed differently. So being tax efficient in your income plan is so important. And I'll give you a quick common, I would say, misconception. And that would be, if we've got retirement money and we're pulling money from, let's say, an account that's taxed at a certain rate, but maybe our IRA or our pre-tax 401k, we're allowing that to defer. And somebody might say, oh, well, I don't need the income. If I pull it out of this account, it'll be taxed. So why should I do that? Why not just defer? Well, when you look at your overall income plan and then you see that at age 72, you have these what's called required minimum distributions, or RMDs. So all of a sudden, if that income is spiked, and in a lot of cases considerably, because now you're forced to take money out of certain accounts based on these RMD rules. Now, all of a sudden, we could be paying a lot more in taxes on that money than we could have paid if we would have just structured our distribution more efficiently over time. And Tony, you might have heard of a Roth IRA, but in a lot of cases, people still have room in the bracket that they're in, and then they can do those what's called Roth conversions to take advantage of the tax bracket that they're in along the way, so we don't have that spike of income when it's mandatory and pay a bit more in taxes than we really could have paid if we would have just structured our income accordingly. And so that's why it really, when you see the income, your overall income plan, and how all the pieces work together to really build this efficient distribution strategy. So not just for this year and next year, but over the long haul. We run our distribution plans all the way to age 100, and we just want to be tax efficient along the way. And that's why, of course, the investments, the income planning, and of course, tax efficiency is all part of a retirement plan.
Yeah, and that's huge, and that plays right into creating an income in retirement, which is the other trick that a lot of people don't know how to exactly do that and make sure they're going to have enough money to last them in retirement, to figure out that amount, and that's something you do as well, right?
Well, it is. I mean, you could take these 5 keys. Certainly, they're holistic. Certainly, they work together. Income planning, let's say, would be a foundational piece, and it's really, understandable that if you spend your whole life working and saving, that when you get to this preservation phase and this distribution phase, it's just different. It's not, you're used to putting money in, not taking money out. So we really are in this second and third phase, which is preservation and distribution. And yes, how it all pairs together, what our Social Security strategy is, and how we're going to maximize that strategy. through our Social Security maximization reports, the Retirement Compass report, all of these tools that we have at our disposal to really pair all this together to make that retirement income all it can be.
Yep, that's important. Now, we're out of time for today's show. It just flew by, so just give that phone number and web address one more time, Anthony, for our listeners to get a hold of you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you got something out of this. Again, the 5 keys to a holistic retirement plan is going to be estate and legacy planning, healthcare planning, and investment strategy, income planning, and tax efficiency. And we really appreciate you tuning in today to Retirement Keys. Call our office if you'd like to get that second opinion. We're happy to provide it. The number is 504-828-2171. Again, 504-828-2171, or visit us online at crescentcityretirement.com.
All right, and that does it for today's episode of Retirement Keys with Anthony Congemi. Thank you for listening to Retirement Keys. Don't pay too much for taxes or retire without a sound income plan. For more information, please contact Anthony Congemi at Crescent City Retirement Group. Call 504-828-2171 or visit the website at crescentcityretirement.com. All matters discussed during this show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. Anthony Congemi and Crescent City Retirement Group are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency.